All right, so welcome. We are at the Fairmont Hotel, the Queen Elizabeth Hotel in Montreal. We are interviewing Mr. Engin Ozberg, and the interviewer will be William McCrae. So let's get started. So just first question, could you please state your full name?
My name is Engin, and last name is Ozberg.
And what is your birthday? Sorry.
My birthday is 1st of October 1948, so I'm 66 years old.
And where were you born?
I was born in Polatlı, Turkey. Polatlı is a town in the city of Ankara. You can say Ankara, Turkey.
Okay. And when you were born, what did your parents do for a living?
My mother raised 3 kids. I was the youngest, and my father worked for the railway agency. So he was a station master for a long time.
Okay. And as a child, what did you do as a pastime or for fun in Turkey?
Well, I guess other than playing some games that in North America I don't think people would know about much. As kids, some of the games we played. But other than that, I liked reading from very early days. I started with the comic books. I used to read a lot of comics, and then got into books. And I used to avidly read. And played with friends. I played soccer, basketball, things like that as well with the friends. So that's what I did.
And did you show early interest in metallurgy or mining?
Not
or
at
minerals?
all. It wasn't even anywhere near my mind. However, the importance of education was always instilled in me by the family, and also all throughout my education life. Somehow I was a very good student. Primary school, secondary school, high school, I just was one of the best in the class and that kind of thing. And so somehow I liked education, I liked math. And I guess towards the high school years, I started thinking about civil engineering, to build a house for the family type of thing. But the decision-making process at the end of the high school was totally independent.
Okay. And did you, when you went to university, did you go to university in Turkey still?
Yes, I did undergraduate studies in Turkey. Again, in North America, it is difficult to understand, but in Turkey, especially in those days, to be able to get into university was a very competitive situation. And there were 2 types of universities. One was for the whole country, state-owned universities. And the way it was done, that you would take the entrance exam, which in those days, if my memory is not failing me, somewhere in the range of 1 million or so students used to take it. And the availability of the universities were such that only about 80,000 or so students would be able to pass those exams, or capacity available in the country. And then you had to make an order of preference when you entered this exam, so that you couldn't exactly go into the branch that you wanted. So wherever your points could fit in, not only that, but also you wouldn't necessarily be in the same city that your parents were. You would also have to go to another city or so, of course, if you could afford it. But then there was another one, which was in those days again very, very unique. It wasn't like private, but it was separate from the state-owned university, even though that was still state-owned as well, which was called Middle East Technical University, but it was established by the Americans. And that one, again, in those days, I think only 3,000 to 4,000 students would be able to take the exam, because even to take the exam, you had to have a certain level of average from the high school even before you could take the exam. And then, for the engineering, out of that 3,000 to 4,000 those days again, only about maybe 50 or 100 could get into the engineering. And the ratios were dismal in that sense. And that's when, and I was able to, when I passed both of those exams, both in the state university, anywhere I could, I wanted, I could go and study. But Middle East Technical University was the best in those days in the country. So I decided to go there, and my selection process was, I wanted to study engineering. I thought electrical was too theoretical, and so it wasn't for me. And also I wanted something international. That's why I guess I changed my mind from civil to metallurgical, because talking to some of the department heads and so on at the university, I found out that metallurgical engineering is very international. You can practice it anywhere practically. So that's what I decided, that's what I studied.
So you wanted to travel in life?
Yes, right from the beginning. And I think that's going to, I was going to mention that later on, but now I can mention. My goal was to finish the university, and if I could, maybe even before I finished the university, to go abroad and get some degrees in abroad, outside of the country.
And would they be completely different degrees, or still engineering?
Anything
related?
engineering, I guess, anything that I could practice both in Turkey and outside of Turkey. And but my family didn't have any money. I had to work through the high school and university and so on to be able to sort of make it, I guess, happen, to be able to afford it. And so towards the end of my university years, then it became a goal to go and do a master's degree outside. So I made many applications. It's a very long story. I could write a book on it. But then finally things came together, and I was able to get an acceptance from Canada. And in those days, if you had an acceptance from a university to do graduate studies, you could get a landed immigrant visa to come to the country. And this is a little bit funny, but it is interesting. So I got an acceptance from, even though my degree was metallurgical engineering, I was finishing. I got an acceptance from, interestingly enough, University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon to do graduate studies in inorganic chemistry, which really, they don't fit. Inorganic chemistry. So with that though, because they were also offering me research assistantship and so on, I could get my landed immigrant visa and came to Canada Christmas Day in 1973. And I had some friends from Middle East Technical University who had just started their graduate studies in Ottawa. So I was
in Ottawa?
In Ottawa. So I was going to spend a few days with them in Ottawa and then continue my way to Saskatoon. And they convinced me that I should go to Saskatoon. That was sort of the end of the world. And I would get lost there and so on, that I should stay in Ottawa, that they would find me a job at a university and whatnot. So I shouldn't. So, and I agreed with him. I phoned the person in Saskatchewan, of course. He was very upset. that I wasn't keeping my promise. And I stayed here, and sure enough, I started applying around, and I got acceptance from several universities. But at the same time, 4 months or so, I found a job with Noranda Research Center. So on the Easter Day of 1974, I started working for Noranda Research Center in Point Claire. Now my plan was, when I came here, that I was going to do my master's degree in 2 years and work for 3 years. And in 5 years, I was going to get rich and go back to Turkey. Well, after the way things unfolded, I've done 2 master's degrees. I'm still trying to get rich, so I'll be here after 43 years or whatever it is.
Have you gone back to Turkey at least?
Oh yeah, I have my family. I brought my mother and my sister. They stayed with us for a while. So yeah, I got. Excuse me, my sister is still alive. My mother, my father passed away now. And so I try to go every 2 years or so, every year, but it works out. Every 2 years I go back and visit family and friends and so.
And when you were, so you refused the school in Saskatchewan, but you applied to other schools.
Yes.
You got into what exactly?
The way it worked out, I guess I'll step back how important this is. When I graduated from Middle East Technical University, for 1 year I worked in Ankara, Turkey, for an organization called Etibank. Etibank was a state-owned bank which also owned a lot of the mining and metallurgical entities on behalf of the government in Turkey. So I worked there for a year, and that's when I was trying to complete the process to get my landed immigrant visa. And when that was completed, then I came. And when I started applying, I applied to Waterloo University, University of Toronto, and so on. And I got acceptance from those, but at the same time, I didn't have any money. I had $147 in my pocket when I arrived in Canada. And even that was borrowed money from friends in Turkey. And so, finding a job started looking more attractive. And it was through a number of coincidences. I found this job in Noranda, which during the job interviews, it came out. I had university acceptance in my hand, and then talking to Noranda, but Noranda told me that they would help me for graduate studies.
Okay, yes.
So therefore, that sounded very attractive, and as a matter of fact, as soon as I started working with Noranda, then I applied to McGill. And in those days, it was just becoming fashionable for engineers to study business administration. So then I got accepted to McGill, and in the evenings, I was taking courses towards MBA. And so I worked for Noranda for 2.5 years. And in those days, Noranda had just developed a brand new technology, Noranda smelting process. And it was competing with several other non-ferrous metal smelting processes. And I was working on some of the impurity challenges that Noranda process was creating for purification of copper. And then, just about a year and a half or so later, I noticed one day one of the CIM bulletins that McGill University was looking for graduate students. Interestingly enough, the job description was almost written for me because they were looking for, they had just bought vacuum induction cars, and they were looking for students who had been working in the industry for 2 years, 3 years, would come back to the university and do graduate studies because they were also trying to, in those days, just beginning the university industry coming together and solving problems and so on. So it would almost be continuation of what I was doing in Noranda Research Center, to do it at McGill and get a master's degree. So I applied and literally I walked in, they accepted me. And then I started working with Professor Rob Guthrie on vacuum copper refining project. And but what I did is I continued with my evening courses on the business administration. So in 1976, at the end of the year, I started that with McGill. And I had started the business administration in 1974, but the fact that it was part-time, I was only taking 1 or 2 courses every semester, so it was going very slow. But it fit in well. So from 76 to 79, I've done my full-time master's degree. I was a full-time student at McGill, and in the evenings I continued.
Busy.
Yes, it was busy. And it was unusual in those days. I think it still is, frankly. But for master's degree, typically, if you publish 1 or 2 papers, you're doing good. We published 4 papers, and we also got an award from TMS for one of our papers with Guthrie. And so in 1979, I then finished my master's degree in metallurgical engineering, and the next semester I finished my MBA degree, postgraduate degree with business administration. So I got my 2 degrees, and before I even finished my thesis and so on, Bob Minto and a few others who were legal graduates, they were working in SNC, so they hired me before I finished. And I had to make a sort of a decision because it was interesting. Noranda, I was still as a graduate student working on Noranda's problems, impurity issues with copper and so on. So whether I should go back to Noranda or SNC. But it sounded very interesting because the projects they were talking about, one was in Philippines, one was in South America, one was in whatever. So sure enough, that was interesting too. And actually it was in one of the Metallurgical Society conferences I gave a paper. Bob Minto approached me and said, you want to come and work for SNC? I said, okay. And I said, well, when we go back on Monday or Tuesday, come and see us and let's talk a little bit more. So I went and talked with him and so on. And then next day he phoned me at home. He said, well, we want to hire you. I said, okay. And by the way, so I said, where should I start? He said, well, by the way, why don't you start on Saturday? Saturday? I said, yeah, because he said, we have a program here that they work so many Saturdays and so many hours and so on, and then they shut down during Christmas for 10, 12 days.
Okay.
So he said that you won't lose any days. I said, okay. We started on Saturday. Tuesday we were on the plane to Chicago to meet some clients. Never stopped.
Not a dull moment.
Never stopped. Then I was a little bit mourning because I said, well, I'd like to take my time. I want to start in a couple of months because my thesis was not finished and I was still typing it. And so, he said, no worry, we have one bunch of typists here. They can type it for me. It didn't come to that because I still had to write it and so on. But yeah, they have been finishing that.
And so, what did you? What was your title exactly at SNC
Well, I
Lavalin?
started as a process engineer for copper. In those days, it was very well organized. Interesting. I worked there for 9 years. I worked for copper specialist. I started copper specialist, and then it became non-ferrous specialist, and it became light metal. So, and when I left the company about 8-9 years later, I was the only process specialist left. Bob Minto was still vice president because he was again, we were going through a cycle, and literally I've done light metals, ferrous metals, and non-ferrous metals, all sorts of projects. And did a number of projects in South America. That project in Philippines never materialized. We didn't get the job, but in Europe and so on. So it was a very challenging, entertaining job, and we were doing a lot of studies. Then I was very much involved in transferring Technip's aluminum smelting technology to Reynolds aluminum expansion in Quebec. That was in those days for 2-3 years, fairly significant project. I was the project engineer, process engineer for that. We transferred the whole technology transfer, patents, technical specifications, and so on. So it was a very challenging job, and did a project in Bolivia that connected me to some other people from, they were called in those days, Sheriff Gordon Mines Limited. And because they were providing the process and we were doing the engineering design for a project in Bolivia. And one thing after another, they insisted that I should join them. And so again, during one of the conferences, they took me out for a dinner and they said, well, why don't you come and talk to us? And they are located in Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta, near Edmonton. So I said, okay. And by that time, I had a wife and 2 kids. And so I went there and talked with them. And we were, all that time.
And this time you were still in Montreal.
Yeah, I was in Montreal. I was just coming to that from practically, when I arrived, first few months in Canada, first few months I was in Ottawa with the friends. And I spent a few weeks in Toronto, again staying with some friends. And then on the Easter day, I started in Noranda. And now I'm jumping from one subject to another, but that was a sort of memorable day too, because I started on Friday, Easter weekend. And they had the worst snowstorm of the year that year. And not right beside Noranda Research Center, which is where I sort of started the job that day and signed papers and so on. Life was easy. Literally 2 blocks away, I found an apartment furnished and so on. So I just walked in like I walked into a hotel and found myself a place. And then everybody was mourning because all their Easter weekend plans were shattered. So we all went to the bistro and had beer.
Bar.
Tavern.
Yeah.
The corner of Hymas and St. John in Point Clear. So we spent a few hours there drinking beer. But I had no idea, no appreciation of snowstorm and Easter weekend getting scrapped and so on.
Yeah.
I was enjoying the beer and anyway, so that was my starting day with the Noranda Research Center. And then on Saturday with SNC Lavalin, and then Sherritt 1989 or 88. I started working for them. I went there. They were all very good, very friendly. And Sherritt Gordon Mines had a very good reputation in technology development and technology applications. And And what they were trying to do was they were trying to add more engineering to the process technology that they are providing to the companies. So they were looking at me as a person to bring in process design engineering to their, add to their skills and capabilities and so on. And they were also looking at expansion and so on. So I was a good fit for them. And I started, we had the interview. I put a conditional. I said, well, I come back. I cannot make these decisions alone. I have to bring my wife, the kids to it, and so on. And so I said, if you guys are willing, I would like to bring them and show them around, and then, I don't have to deal with it. And they said, okay. Kindly enough, they paid our travel expenses, and we took an Easter weekend. Easter is an important thing in my life.
It's a life changer for you.
Yeah, life changer. So we went there on Easter weekend, spent 3 days there. They were again very gracious, very nice to me, and the family. Every day, one of the managers took us around and showed us around and so on. But life in Edmonton and Fort Saskatchewan and so on. And then some of them, they turned out to be lifetime friends, and the same is still. So did Bob Minto, and of course my professor, Ratri, and a few others there, friends. I'm from Noranda Research Center, friends. So the kids and the wife, they said, well, if you like it, we'll like it. So we bite the bullet and moved to Fort Saskatchewan. And we were there for 9 years. And I enjoyed the job very much. I guess with SNC, my title went up. When I left them, I think I was senior process specialist, or whatever it was called, and then with Sherritt I became consulting metallurgist. Consulting metallurgist was a fairly significant title, and so I was in charge of they had technologies on zinc, gold, nickel, and cobalt, and so on. So I was in charge of zinc. Again, though, as soon as I started the job, it was very, very troubling job. Troubling.
Okay.
I've been on the road a lot. So literally my wife raised the 2 boys. I wasn't home. And we have very interesting and funny stories about that. How she innovated and kept them happy. And I guess with SNC, being flexible, I learned, and being relevant, I learned a lot, because in the engineering companies, if you're not reimbursable, you don't exist. What that means is somebody always has to pay your time and salary, and therefore you have to make yourself acceptable to the people who are in need of your skills. So therefore, that's a big challenge.
Adaptability.
Adaptability, and after a while, one month or 1 week or 6 months you're working on copper or whatever, and then the next day you're working on aluminum, and the next day you're working on zinc, and so on and so on. It's just using the, I guess, main principles of engineering and technical skills. But at the same time, whatever you do, you're always under the microscope, because what you generate has to be acceptable and relevant to the needs of your customer, client, and internally and externally. Because in in your junior years, you do what you're asked to do, and so when internally then the project managers and so on, they have to like what you're doing, otherwise you're put on the blacklist. The next project, they push your name aside, and you're pushed aside 2-3 times, and then you're gone. And then I learned that I was doing exactly the same thing to others, because meanwhile as project manager, you're under the microscope because you have to continuously deliver to your customer. So the team you put together has to
That's
deliver.
productive.
Has to deliver.
Was there ever a job or a specific project that was completely disorganized or
I don't
failed?
think so. I don't think so. But there were a lot of situations, because at the SNC and also at Sheriff too, that we were actually called in to help organizing it or reorganizing it, and that became more and more in demand when I was at Sheriff, because then I was being looked upon more as an expert consultant, plant productivities and so on, and it was, even though it wasn't necessarily directly what I was supposed to be doing, but I did quite a bit actually. We were designing, building hydrometeorological plants around the world. But at the same time, I was getting calls from, because I was also giving papers and so on. Russia was, Russian allies were collapsing, and companies like KPMG and Deloitte and so on, they were looking for technical experts to go and look into the plants there and help them to reorganize them, make them a little bit more westernized and so on. So I've done projects like that in Bulgaria, Kazakhstan, and Poland, even in Russia, under Sheriff. And also, while doing that, of course, try to in a way promote shared technologies in those places. And I guess one of the most challenging and interesting jobs I've done with Sheriff was we actually built a plant, and I was the project manager for that in Datteln in Germany. For 2.5 years I was going back and forth to Germany. We built a zinc plant and started operating it and so on. And I always sort of mention this, in those days I think worldwide there were 83 or 84 zinc plants, and I've been to like 66 of them. So going and looking at the zinc plants, how we can.
So you guys knew what you were building.
Exactly. And I started projects in Mexico and Argentina.
What would be your most memorable professional travel trip?
Greenland. I've been to
Greenland?
Greenland.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I've been to Greenland a couple of times. It was very interesting. Greenland had some excess energy, and the way they were going to generate the energy was very interesting, because it was from 2 levels of lakes and ice melting and so on, water flowing from one lake to another, and from that it's like they were going to make electricity, and they were going to have some excess electricity, and they were trying to convert that excess electricity to some product. And then in northern Greenland there was a zinc plant. They were thinking about moving that zinc concentrate to that location and build a zinc refinery, because zinc production takes electricity, electrolysis. So they were looking at it. I mean, I was studying, and the people who were working on it were Canadians. That's another guy we should talk to, Bob Guinicott. Bob Guinicott is in Toronto. I think he still is. he was very active in Greenland, and he was also very instrumental in development of diamond project. He has a book, he's mentioned of De Beers in the Northern Territory.
Okay.
So he's involved in that. So he would bring some interesting perspective. And he was involved in that. Anyway, so I was effectively consultant to him, and he was consultant to the Greenland government because he had worked in Greenland for a number of years. So we went there, and we were sort of presenting this concept. I actually gave a presentation in the cabinet room of Greenland government to their premier and cabinet members and describe what this project is, and then they it was a fairly public and it's a very democratic 55,000 people in the whole Greenland, and about 10-15,000 of those live in the city that we were in. And so actually I went there twice, and those trips were very memorable because then after the cabinet room presentation in the parliament, that night there was also a public hearing, a public meeting. There were about like a couple of hundred people there with TV and so on. So we were sitting there as experts answering the questions from the public, and there was television crew from Denmark and so on. And then the weather turned that ugly. So we got stuck there for a couple of days. And then finally, and we had to change all our routing and everything. Very small airport terminal. So I mean the whole event, one thing after another, was very memorable. Apart from being on TV in the cabinet and so on, talking about this project, how it could fit in, being in Greenland, how often one goes to Greenland, and then finally, after waiting for 2 days or so for the airplanes to start running again, they took us to this terminal. But it was still taking quite a bit of time for the plane to come and take us to another airport, and from there to take us to Europe, to Denmark, and then I was going to come back. So on the way, we went via Quebec, more direct, but those planes were not running, so we had to go to Europe. There were more frequent flights to
Quite a detour.
Yeah, we had to make a detour. So we were waiting in the terminal there, and such a long time. I got tired. I could sleep anywhere, anyhow. And so I was leaning to the wall because there's no place to sit. So leaning to the wall. I guess fell asleep for a while.
On the wall.
On the wall.
Wow.
And the TV crew were filming us a few days before about this public meeting. Actually took a film of me standing there. So,
It's quite a talent to fall asleep standing up.
and then the funny part is, finally we all got into the flight, and we're traveling back to Denmark. They all came and they're laughing and so. They said, "We're going to show you something." And I said, "Okay, what is it?" And they said, "Look, this is how we treat our consultants we bring." So we had a good laugh. But I have quite a number of interesting trips on this in Greenland. I went to Norilsk, Siberia.
Oh wow.
And we were one of the first Westerners that went there, maybe, if not the first, second. So we had to actually get special visa in Moscow to be able to travel because it was very Gulag, and it was closed. It was just opening, and they wanted to show us this huge complex, nickel and cobalt production and so on, and metallurgical complex because they were trying to gain more productive and so on. And interestingly enough, they had copied Sherritt's technology, hydrometallurgical technology, and they had all these autoclaves and so on. So we went as a group to look into that, and I was heading a little team. Actually, there were only about 2-3 of us. So that was very interesting. The whole trip, you can write a short story about some of the events during the trip and so on. And I've done projects that was with SNC days. I've done projects in Peru. So I was traveling to Centromin. Centromin, from metallurgical mining point of view, is very historical, very unique, very interesting place because it is 4,000 meter elevation, and literally they give you oxygen tubes if you're not used to it. That because breathing and so on, moving around,
Yes.
is challenging. Now for that we had to design plans accordingly and so on. So it was a totally different specification to understand that and deal with it and make the plant design accordingly. So that was again very challenging and interesting job. So I've got a number of trips, I must say, that I made in South Africa, Thailand, Japan. I've done 2-3 projects in Japan, and at one time I was traveling to Japan every couple of months, couple of weeks. I love Japan. Japan is wonderful.
Yeah, I'd like to go someday.
In many aspects, it was very interesting. So I think professionally, what I had dreamed of, metallurgy being
Came true.
international, came true.
Absolutely.
And I guess I was, to a large extent, lucky. Things, the way they came together, that I was able to, I worked through SNC, never had any problem, 8-9 years. It was always good work, challenging, interesting work, a lot of international travel. And with Sherritt, it was always very good work. Yeah, we had some very challenging situations to be able to make the plants and processes work and so on. But every job I left with my own decision, which is these days that's important. And then I joined from Sherritt through headhunters and so on. I joined Cameco. And I used to, when I took the job, I was really fortunate because this is uranium and nuclear. I used to tell everybody that I could hardly spell uranium because I had not done any work related with uranium and or with nuclear. So, and I was first manager of research for the company. It was a corporate position, so from exploration to nuclear, anything that they were interested or doing was under my responsibility. Then I became director, and then I was the first vice president of technology innovation of the company. And I worked for them for 16 years. Every job I did, I had to write the job description myself. Because it was always
new.
position.
Yeah.
Position. And in March of 2011, March of 2013, I retired. and then started what I'm doing now. And this is something that I had started working on, International Minerals Innovation Institute, when I became vice president. I realized, and then I was asked to move to Saskatoon, and I realized that to be able to do my job, I needed resources, technical people. So in Saskatoon, at the university, there wasn't. So I took it on. We should expand the education, training, and research and development capabilities in the province. So I built this organization, International Minerals Innovation Institute. Then when I retired, I became the executive director and senior technical advisor.
You're still there though.
I am
Full-time?
full-time and a half.
Yeah.
And but I took it as a 2 years contract, and at the end of this year, I will not be full-time anymore.
You're gonna ease into real retirement.
Well, we'll see. Because I'm on the boards of several organizations, and I just joined recently the board of a junior mining company. So I'll be still active. In all my professional life, now I don't know if is this conversation going for you. I mean, is this what you want?
Yeah, this is good. This is good. I just hope we can hear okay.
Well, I hope so.
Worst comes to worst, like I said, if there's specific questions that I really liked or that we can't hear very well, I'll call you back and maybe we can just get a clearer voice.
Because I guess I was going to say that when I came to Canada, all through my professional life, I've been very active with CIM, Metallurgical Society, organizations and so on. So in terms of, I guess, working on certain projects and making those projects happen, I had to starting to watch this thing, 2 o'clock. I have built, literally started from zero, several things. One of them is the Metallurgical Society didn't have black metal section. And I was working on the aluminum and magnesium projects where I was with SNC. I just questioned how come in Metallurgical Society we don't have white metals. So I started a white metal section in Metallurgical Society. I'm one of the founding members of that. And equally so, over the last 10 years or so, in Canada, the mining industry changed substantially, changed the ownership. And that changing the ownership, Canada used to be mining and metallurgical technologies leader in the world. It became more and more the infrastructure for research and development started disappearing. So connected with some federal government people and some, I guess, concerned citizens in 2007, with my position as the Vice President of Innovation Technology for Cameco as well, we initiated the formation of Canada Mining Innovation Council. So I'm one of the founding members of it. And right now it is an organization, and we managed to coordinate one of the largest mining exploration project put together. 23 companies and 20, whatever those numbers are, I may not be exact, universities and companies involved, and largest investment from Answer, it's about $13 million. Footprint project it is called. Footprint reduction project on exploration. That's one of the first contributions of Canada Mining Innovation Council. While we were doing that, we also noticed, and I've been complaining about this, there's not an organization for potash and uranium to do research and so. So I started the formation of International Minerals Innovation Institute. So I'm the founding members of one of the three founding members of that organization. So I guess I can count to my name those three organizations, Light Metal Section, CMIC, and IMAI, that I played a very substantial role in formation of those.
Well, that's something.
It is, and this IMII now, we have 11 projects in Saskatchewan, and invested about $14-15 million.
Yeah, you're the founder of that, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm the founder of it, and so it is coming along very strong, and hopefully it will continue. We get about $9 million from the companies so far, and we are getting about $3.5 million from provincial government, and we're hoping to get some money from the federal government as well. So, very projects.
Is she there?
What are we going to do here?
Sorry?
We ran out of time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And
There. Sorry.
the
Repeat.
first International Relations Committee of CIM as well. I was the very first one. I forgot to mention that. So that was on the CIM level, and then METSAC level, Light Metal Section, and then I guess federal level, Canada Mining Innovation Council, and provincial level, International Minerals Innovation Institute. I was instrumental in forming this. Bill, one of the because I played quite a bit of role in METSAC executive committees and so on, and that also put me in the CIM executive committees and so on for a while. And in 91, 92, whenever it was, then the president of CIM, I think his name was William Rao, and he saw that I was doing a lot of international traveling and I was everywhere. And so he asked me to start this international relations. So I was there for 2-3 years. I negotiated memorandum of understandings with TMS, US organization, a European organization, and so on behalf of CIM. This is sort of over and above what I was doing for the company I was working for. And also I organized, as I did for this conference, many international symposia, conferences, and short courses, professional development programs, not only in Canada, but working with METSAC and CIM in Chile, Japan, Australia, and so on.
Was there
Working with their organizations.
Were there, to take play a different turn here, were there any, I guess, periods in your life or specific projects or minerals you were working on that ended up being quite controversial, or that
Uranium, nuclear, all through it was, and I had to always try to defend and present how wrong the myth is.
well, because it's an irrational fear.
Yeah,
it's just like
exactly.
sharks, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So a lot of people opposed any form of development, right?
We were right in the middle of it in Port Hope, because our research center was in Port Hope. Port Hope is a little town between Kingston and Toronto, and we were always. I think she was. Yeah.
With the, yeah. So you were talking about Porto and uranium.
Yeah, Port Hope. And there were very vocal opponents to uranium and nuclear and so on. So they were always questioning, and we were always under microscope. So we had to always provide accurate data, tell the truth, and try to sort of explain to people who are very concerned and worried that, yeah, there are risks, absolutely, but meanwhile there are many barriers to mitigate the risk and so on. So yeah, definitely that was a challenge. What I mentioned earlier about Greenland, the public meeting, I mean, people again were naturally concerned. Zinc concentrate is going to become dust and acid and smell, and there are many concerns. So they were looking at experts' opinion. If these are things to be feared of, I must say those were more concerns, questions of not knowing. But what we were dealing in Porto was a little bit different. It was, they thought they knew how dangerous and bad this is, and therefore they never believed what we said. And whereas the experience in Greenland, they understood and we explained to
In
them.
Greenland, you were more there to inform, and in Porto, more there to defend.
Defend,
Yeah.
exactly. That was a big difference.
And if you had to pick one specific moment in your career or thing you did in your career, what would be that proudest moment?
Well, I think there are quite few, frankly. One of them is, I think, I was with Cameco. Yeah, I was in charge of research and development and technology and innovation and so on. The fact that we did a couple of things there, the fact that it was such a wide range of technical issues we were dealing with, that I was able to cope with it. People still came to me, and I was still a go-to person. I didn't know anything about geology exploration. I didn't know anything about nuclear. I didn't know anything about fluorine gas, this, that, the other. But they came, and I tried to, as much as possible, find the resources and get answers for them. So that's one aspect of it, being able to deal with many different expertise. And the other aspect was I took on one of our plants was struggling, and they were also building a project, brand new project and so on. I took that on as a project manager, and several huge companies are involved and so on, but meanwhile the plant itself was struggling. First I took it on to fix the project. The project was not being handled well. While I was fixing the project management, then I realized that the whole plant management is a fairly significant issue. Then I took that on, and I worked with Deloitte and consultants and so on. But in a way, it had to be done. I was the guy who made it happen. In one day, we changed 6 top managers of the plant, all of them.
In how many days?
In one day.
In one day?
Same day. We took all 6 managers off their jobs, including the general manager. And we ran the plant with consultants for 6 months, till we could find new people to hire and put in their place. And now it became one of the most progressive and profitable entities of the company. So that I think is.
They saved the plant.
We did save the plant. And
What kind of plant was it?
It is fuel manufacturing plant. I don't want to give you, maybe I even wouldn't mention it because of the confidentiality.
Okay.
I shouldn't even mention it. I'll take that off. Let's just call it the plant.
Okay. Got it.
That fuel manufacturing, because as soon as you say fuel manufacturer,
They would know.
they
Okay, got it.
about we can say a plant,
And if
6 managers.
I know we're gonna finish any minute now, so I'll ask you probably my favorite question that I like to ask is, if you did have to give a piece of advice or something of the sort to someone quite younger like me or a student, what would be your one piece of advice? Your one life lesson?
Well, definitely always tell the truth. Integrity.
Integrity.
And tell the people what you know, what you don't know. And that will never hurt. If you pretend, you'll get screwed one way or another.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, recently I did another interview, and but it was for a Turkish online magazine, because they were also asking about people coming from Turkey and so on. And then I realized afterwards they also published it in English, but it's a terrible translation.
I think I might have read it actually.
Did you?
Yeah.
And also they also had a lot of errors in it, unfortunately. But I found out that they were going to publish it in English after the fact. So, and I didn't go back and track it back. So, then frankly I said, well, who's going to read this? It's one of those things. So but I felt uncomfortable. The Turkish version of it is better.
Yes.
So integrity and working hard. Working hard always pays back.
Rules to live by.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Working hard. I worked hard all my life. I still do. And I enjoy working.
Clearly, you retired, but you didn't. So.
No. And it's just now I'm supposed to be going part-time. I don't know what kind of a part-time that's going to be. My wife teases me, probably I'll be doing 4 or 5 part-times. It's going to be 2-3
Yeah.
jobs when you put it all together.
Yeah.